Hi everyone, welcome back to My Parenting Way. My name's Katie and today I'm going to give you 9 important things you need to know about having a C-section. So whether you're having a planned C-section because baby's breech or because you feel like it's the right thing for you to do, or whether you are planning to have a natural birth but you just like to know a bit more about having a C-section and be a bit more mentally prepped about having one in case you need one, here are a few things about having a C-section that I wish I knew before having both of mine. Number 1, the anaesthetic that you're given is called a spinal block, and that is different from an epidural, which can be topped up at different times. And when this anaesthetic finally wears off after having the baby, you can end up shaking uncontrollably. And this is just your body's natural reaction to the anaesthetic. But it's something you might want to consider because even simple things like holding your baby can actually become a challenge when you're shaking so much. And this is something that I never knew before having one. I couldn't even hold my son for the first hour after having him because I was shaking so uncontrollably. So I just handed him over to my husband and I just lay back. I just felt really smug about myself for being able to get through major surgery again for the second time, and I just let the midwife pamper me and it was great. In the UK, you are expected to stay in hospital for a minimum of 24 hours after having a C-section. And this is to make sure that your scar is safe, make sure that you are weaning properly before you leave, and to make sure your basic vital signs such as your blood pressure and your temperature are normal before you leave the hospital. On average though, most women stay in hospital anywhere between 3 and 4 days before going home after having a C-section. And it's completely up to you. I would fully make the most of that time when you're in hospital. A lot of women like to rush home the moment they have the baby because they want to be in their own environment, which is very understandable. But after having a C-section, it can do a lot to your body, and just take the pampering while you can because you won't get that kind of help at home. Number 3, the closest person that's going to be with you in the operating theatre, besides your partner, obviously, is the anaesthetist. So you would have actually thought it would either be the midwife or the surgeon, but the midwife is actually off elsewhere waiting for the baby to be born and actually going to check the baby rather than staying with you. And the surgeon's the one that's going to be actually pulling baby out, and that's what they're going to be focused on. So the anaesthetist is actually going to be stood around your head, stood around here while you're on the table, and that person will be constantly checking in with you to see how you're feeling. Are you feeling lightheaded? Are you cold? And basically having this constant conversation with you to make sure that you're okay. So get to know your anaesthetist because they're the most important person other than you and your partner in the room whilst you're having the baby. Number 4, the C-section incision is actually just below your bikini line, and there is no need to shave or wax this before you have a C-section. In fact, I was told by a midwife once that the surgeon will actually use your bikini line as a little indicator of where to make the incision. So if you start shaving it or waxing it just before you have the baby, it actually makes it a little bit more tricky for the surgeon to know where to cut. So just leave it hairy, it's totally fine. The surgeon or the midwife or any of the theatre staff will shave it on the day for you before you actually go in, and that's absolutely fine. Number 5, a catheter will be inserted to collect the wee after you've had the C-section because of the spinal block, you won't be able to feel when you actually need a wee. This can be removed the moment the spinal block starts to wear off and you're able to feel your legs to safely get up and move to the toilet. So then the catheter will be removed, and that's when the clock starts. So here in the UK, once a catheter is removed after having a C-section, they will expect you to have a wee naturally by yourself within 5 hours of having the catheter removed. If you are unable to go for a wee, this puts too much pressure on your bladder and too much strain, which can then become dangerous, and they have to reinsert the catheter again. So bear that in mind once the catheter is out. And when you do decide to go for a wee, you will be expected to wee on a cardboard bowl, basically, so that the midwives are able to collect this and measure how much wee is actually coming out. Sounds gross, but it's true. Number 6, Speaking of the first wee after the catheter is removed, the first wee will be horrendous. You'll be sat there on the loo while your baby is next door, and your brain will be telling you that your bladder is full. But no matter how hard you try, you will not be able to wee. I remember sitting there for almost an hour after having Aiden, and I could not wee, and I was getting so stressed out about it. And I think I ended up just watching like funny cat videos on my phone for ages. And I think there was one particular one that made me laugh quite a lot. And that laughter, that expulsion of air, all of a sudden made me start to wee. And honestly, when it started, it would not stop. And I almost filled an entire massive cardboard bowl full of wee, and I think the midwife was quite shocked when she came in to see how much I actually did. Another little tip as well is to actually bring a jug from home, like a little water jug, to actually pour warm water over your bits when you try and wee, because that can sometimes stimulate the wee to come a little bit easier. Number 7, the moment that baby and the placenta leave your body, it does stimulate milk production if you want to breastfeed. It has been suggested that mums who have C-sections, their milk comes in slightly later than those mums who've had natural births, but that might be because of the stress of surgery and all the anaesthetics and things that go through your system. Just remember to try and relax when you can, put the baby on your breast as often as he or she needs, and always ask for help if you don't know what you're doing or if you need any extra help with breastfeeding whilst you're in the hospital. Number 8. One of the downsides about having a C-section is that babies aren't naturally colonised with a mother's bacteria. And what do I mean by this? So as the baby passes through the vagina into the world, all the mother's natural flora around the vagina and anus actually passes on to the baby, and that's full of microbes to start the baby's natural immune system. There has been some suggestion that you can actually ask for something called vaginal seeding, where a swab is taken from the mother's vagina and then rubbed all over the baby's face and mouth and neck and all this area, just to pass on those microbes. But it's not a very commonplace thing to do here in the UK, and there's actually very little evidence that babies who've had this done are at any more benefit than babies who haven't. They just find that their immune systems work in slightly different ways, and actually there is very little evidence to suggest this will be beneficial to your baby long term. But if you have any concerns or questions about this, I suggest you actually chat to your midwife or doctor, who will be able to explain it in more detail. Number 9. If you've had a previous C-section, then you are able to both either have a C-section again after, or a natural vaginal birth. Just because you've had a C-section once, it doesn't mean that you can't have a C-section again. The scar will be in the same place as the previous one, and it'll also be the same size. And actually the recovery time is roughly the same. In fact, if anything, for me, I've had 2 C-sections, one with my daughter because she was breech, and an emergency one with my son the second time round. And actually the second time round, even though I had gone through 18 hours of labour, I still actually ended up recovering faster than my previous C-section. And I think it's because mentally I was a lot more prepped for it. I knew what the recovery was for me, and I also wasn't as scared because I had gone through the surgery before, and actually that went all to my benefit, and I recovered really quickly. However, saying this, multiple C-sections does come with higher risks long term, and the more C-sections you have, the more likely that the placenta going forward with subsequent babies can attach itself to previous scar tissue, and you're more likely, unfortunately, to have bladder and bowel issues. Or if you would fancy a natural birth a second time round, then you can ask for something called a VBAC, which is vaginal birth after C-section, and this is perfectly okay. However, having a VBAC does mean that you are not able to have a home birth, and you're not also able to have the baby in a birthing centre. And this will be because the baby needs to be continuously monitored, and you are statistically more likely to need a second or third or fourth C-section after a previous C-section. Saying that, however, 75% of women who have had a previous C-section do go on to have a successful vaginal birth. So that's not bad, is it? So there you go. I hope you found this helpful, and please remember, having a C-section is not the easy way out. You are still giving birth to your beautiful baby, and this is a huge compliment, so you should be proud of what your body is able to achieve. As usual, please hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to get all the updates on me and Aiden and what we're getting up to, and I hope to see you again soon.